Unity Mitford was the fourth of the 6 famed Mitford sisters. Growing up, she struggled to assert herself in a large family of strong characters, but owing to her close relationship with Hitler, she soon became notorious. It is speculated that Unity may have been Hitler's lover and that she even had his child, but this obsession with a Nazi leader would eventually lead to her tragic demise. Join me to find out why. Unity Mitford was born on the 8th of August 1914. Her parents, David Freeman Mitford, 2nd Baron Riesdale, and Sidney Mitford, née Bowles, decided to name her Unity as a symbolic gesture, owing to the fact that Britain had entered what would eventually become known as the First World War 4 days before she was born. Although initially of no significance, Unity was conceived in the town of Swastika, Ontario in Canada, which is curious when considering how her life played out. Unity was the fourth of the Mitford sisters. Nancy, Pamela and Diana, as well as their sole brother Tom, having been born before her. Jessica and Deborah would follow in 1917 and 1920. Unlike her older siblings, who had been almost entirely homeschooled, by the time Unity was of school-going age, the family had relocated to Oxfordshire, and her parents had become more willing to allow their younger daughters to attend formal schooling. Consequently, she attended St Margaret's School at Bushey in Hertfordshire. As a child, she struggled to assert herself within the large family unit. By the time she was in her early teens, her older sisters were already prominent figures on the London social scene, and they were all opinionated and strong-willed, with various literary and social ambitions. Amongst them, Unity struggled to carve out her own identity, and this would later play a part in how her life developed. In the early 1930s, Unity began to show an affinity for fascist politics, which was sweeping across Europe in the aftermath of the Wall Street crash of 1929 and the Great Depression which followed. Her mother, older sister Diana, and brother Tom shared her political views, and from 1932 onwards, when Diana began seeing Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Union of Fascists, the family became tied into Britain's own fledgling fascist politics. This contrasted sharply with Unity's younger sister Jessica, who had a growing affinity with communist politics. The pair shared a room in the family home in Oxfordshire, and during the early 1930s, it was divided down the middle with a chalk line. Jessica decorated her side with pictures of the first leader of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin, and the hammer and sickle insignia of Russian communism, while Unity put up a photo of Adolf Hitler, the leader of the German Nazi Party, and a swastika, the Nazi symbol. It would be easy to dismiss these actions as two teenage sisters trying to antagonize each other, but this political divide became all too real in the mid-1930s. Well, Jessica would eventually elope to Spain to join the communist side in the Spanish Civil War, but before even that had happened, Unity had headed off to Germany with Diana to accompany Oswald Mosley to the annual Nazi rally in the southern German city of Nuremberg in the mid-autumn of 1933. There she met Adolf Hitler for the first time, and quickly became infatuated with him. Following this initial meeting with Hitler in 1933, Unity became determined to win her way into the German leader's inner circle. She later stated of this initial contact that, "The first time I saw him, I knew there was no one I would rather meet." By this time, Unity was convinced about Hitler, and this soon turned into worship. She was now set on being as near to Hitler as she possibly could, and to win his affections, despite the fact that he was already into his mid-40s and she was not yet 20. As a result, Unity soon returned to Germany in the summer of 1934 and enrolled in a language school in Munich. Unity was so obsessed with the German leader that she soon began stalking him, taking note of his daily activities and tracking which hotels and cafes he frequented. It wasn't long until she noticed that Hitler would often eat in the Osteria Bavaria in Munich, so she decided to sit near the entrance every day, and when Hitler came in, he would notice her. Then, after 10 months of sitting in the Osteria Bavaria restaurant, Hitler finally invited her to his table, and after talking for 30 minutes, Hitler picked up the bill. Unity wrote the following to her father about the encounter. "It was the most wonderful and beautiful day of my life, and I am so happy that I wouldn't mind a bit dying. I'd suppose I'm the luckiest girl in the world, for he is the greatest man of all time." Soon, Hitler also became somewhat infatuated with a young blonde British student, who he described as a perfect specimen of Aryan womanhood. He was impressed by her intriguing ties to Germanic culture, such as her middle name Valkyrie, and the fact that Unity's grandfather had been friends with Richard Wagner, one of his idols. It should also be noted that Hitler was an extremely superstitious man, and he believed that Unity was sort of sent to him, as if it was destined. Following this, Hitler began inviting Unity to various party rallies and state events, and he used her to create jealousy in his current partner, Eva Braun, who was 2 years older than Unity. As Unity spent more and more time with the Nazi leader, Braun's psychological state deteriorated, and she attempted to kill herself in May 1935, the second such suicide attempt. After that, records show that Hitler committed to their relationship, seemingly in the belief that Braun had shown adequate loyalty to him in her willingness to take her own life should he reject her. Despite Hitler settling on Eva Braun at this time, Unity continued to move in the German leader's inner circle. She accompanied him during several events held at the Summer Olympics in Berlin in 1936 and was present in Vienna in March 1938 after the Nazis had managed to annex Austria in a bloodless coup. The Nazi leader even arranged for her to be given an apartment in the city of Munich from which a Jewish couple were evicted. In total, it is believed that Unity met Hitler on more than 100 occasions, and this consequently means that she spent more time in the company of the Nazi leader following his ascent to power in 1933 than any other British person. The peculiar ascent of Unity within the Nazi party was looked at suspiciously by many senior Nazi figures, even if she had gained favour with Hitler. Some worried that she might be a British spy of some kind. Others were simply confounded as to why Hitler allowed her to attend social gatherings of his inner circle, many of whom he had known since the mid-1920s. Yet in time, she won many over. On her copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's autobiographical political manifesto, Unity not only managed to acquire Hitler's signature, but also those of Hermann Göring, Heinrich Himmler, as well as the other most senior members of the Nazi regime. Unity's political views are quite hard to get a clear picture of. She espoused many of the attitudes of German fascism, including its severe racial antipathy towards the Jewish people and other groups in Eastern Europe. At a Hitler Youth rally in the mid-1930s, she proudly asserted that she was a, quote, Jew hater, and she was ardent in her fascism in other ways. For instance, when in England she would show up to social events wearing the black shirt uniform of the British Union of Fascists, and even attended communist meetings to heckle the speakers. However, whether this was the political outlook of someone who had reflected on fascist theories and ideology and began to advocate it, or was the immature actions of a confused young woman who really wanted to belong to something, regardless of what that something might be, is open to debate. In one respect alone do we see Unity ploughing her own path when it came to her political outlook. She was unquestionably a British nationalist. As the years went by through the late 1930s, and war between Germany and Britain became more and more likely, she was known to express her desire that the Nazis would find a way to reach an agreement with Britain and avoid war with her native country. Unity made her feelings in this respect known to Hitler, and in the end, her inability to reconcile her worship of Hitler and German fascism with her love for her homeland would be her downfall. Hitler had informed both Diana and Unity in the summer of 1939 that war between Britain and Germany was inevitable, as the Nazis fully intended to invade Poland within a matter of weeks, and Britain and France had made it clear that such an action would result in a state of war existing between them and Germany. As the fateful day approached, the two sisters deliberated on what to do. Ultimately, Diana took the decision to return home with Oswald Mosley, and the Mosleys no doubt began preparing to acquire a position of some prominence in Britain if the Nazis succeeded in defeating their own native country. Unity took the opposite decision and remained in Germany, despite her family's pleas for her to return to England. Tragically, Unity's psychological state was very poor in the days leading up to the outbreak of the Second World War. Before Diana left Germany, her younger sister had told her that she might take her own life if the two countries ended up at war, and so it proved. When Britain declared war on Germany on the 3rd of September 1939, Following the Nazi invasion of Poland 2 days earlier, Unity shot herself in the head with a pistol in Munich. But the bullet did not kill her, though it did become lodged in her head. After her attempted suicide, Unity was sent to a Munich hospital where she remained unconscious for the next 2 months. During this time, Hitler visited her on several occasions and paid her medical bills. When she finally regained consciousness, she was sent across the Alpine border to neutral Switzerland. There, her mother and youngest sister Deborah arrived at the city of Bern and arranged for her to be brought back home to England. When they eventually arrived to Switzerland in January 1940, they found Unity in a dreadful condition. Deborah, writing over 60 years later, described her sister in the following words. "We were not prepared for what we found. The person lying in bed was desperately ill. She had lost 2 stone, was all huge eyes and matted hair, untouched since the bullet went through her skull. The bullet was still in her head, inoperable, the doctor said. She could not walk, talked with difficulty, and was a changed personality, like one who had had a stroke. Not only was her appearance shocking, she was a stranger, someone we did not know." Her mother and Deborah arranged for her to be brought back to England with the bullet still in Unity's head. There, despite calls for her to be interred as a Nazi sympathiser, as Diana was from the summer of 1940 onwards, Unity remained at the family home in Oxford. This was in part thanks to the intervention of the Home Secretary John Anderson at the behest of her father, and because she wasn't deemed a threat given her physical and psychological state. There she was cared for by her mother, but despite relearning how to walk and carry out some basic tasks, she never really regained any of her mental faculties. An assessment by one of her medical team a few years later described her as having the mental age of a 10-year-old. In spite of this, Unity is alleged to have had a relationship with the RAF pilot officer John Andrews. He was stationed nearby, and although he was a married man and father, the affair would last until the 11th of September 1941. It only ended as MI5 caught wind of what was occurring, and they immediately reported it to Herbert Morrison, the Home Secretary at the time. It was also rumoured at this time that Unity drives about the countryside and picks up airmen, etc., and interrogates them. As a result, Andrews was reposted to the far north of Scotland, where he possibly later died in a Spitfire crash in 1945. In the late spring of 1948, Unity became ill while on a family visit to the tiny island of Inchkenneth off the west coast of Scotland. This was a piece of land which the Mitfords had acquired some years earlier. The bullet in her head had moved, and her brain began to swell. She was taken to hospital, but doctors decided it was not possible to operate. Shortly afterwards, on the 28th of May 1948, she died from meningitis, aged 33. In death, a number of rumours and conspiracy theories attached themselves to Unity. One emerged after reports concerning her made by MI5 were declassified in 2002. At the time, a British journalist, Martin Bright, published an article in The Observer in which he speculated that Unity had not shot herself at all, but that the injury had likely been fabricated to avoid her being arrested on her return to Britain. The article by Bright occasioned a stern response by Deborah Mitford in the pages of the same newspaper. Bright accepted he'd been wrong in a subsequent article in the New Statesman, published in 2007. A second conspiracy theory which concerned Unity also involved Martin Bright. In the same New Statesman article in 2007, he stated that following his initial publication in 2002, he had received a tip that Unity had actually returned to Britain pregnant in 1940 and had given birth to a child at a maternity hospital in Oxford. Bright consequently speculated that Unity might have been carrying Hitler's child, and that the Nazi leader's offspring had thus lived unknowingly in Britain throughout the second half of the 20th century. A Channel 4 documentary entitled Hitler's British Girl was subsequently aired late in 2007, but the claims remained entirely speculative, as no record of Unity giving birth in Oxford in 1940 was ever uncovered, though this was not uncommon, as birth records for the first years of the war were patchy, given the unrest caused by the conflict. Thank you everyone so much for watching this video on Unity Mitford. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of a life down below in the comments, and if you have any other suggestions, also be sure to leave those down below in the comments. I've already covered the lives of the first 3 Mitford sisters, so be sure to check those out on the channel. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.